Okay, so first I have an announcement. I learned from Third Act that there's going to be a women's People March in Concord tomorrow, January 8th at 2 p.m. And it's in the agenda already, but I will put mute. I'm going to put the registration link in the chat in case anybody is interested in finding out more information. I really only know that it's kind of a visibility. I think Governor Ayotte, or soon to be Governor Ayotte, will be sworn in, I believe, tomorrow. And so, oh no, not tomorrow. Did that happen today? No.
She gets sworn in on the 9th with the executive council.
The
Tomorrow
9th.
we have session. The House has session tomorrow.
Okay, so does it make sense for people to show up with climate signs at 2 p.m. like the Women's March is planning on doing?
I mean, it's never a bad idea to be
Okay,
seen.
right, great. Okay, so there's a place to register. I'm gonna go there with a most effective climate sign, and it'd be great to see anybody who can make it there also. Okay. All right, the next topic is the State Comprehensive Climate Action Plan. And so there was some emails across the network Google group today about this. Mara Hoplazamazian of NHPR wrote an interesting article for the Valley News. That's also in the agenda, but I'll put it here as well. With the disappointing conclusion that instead of doing what most states are doing, which is the legislature has passed specific greenhouse gas emission reduction goals, and then the administration can strive to meet those goals. It looks like what the Department of Environmental Services will be doing is seeing what what they can get from federal funding opportunities, working with business to figure out what voluntary measures they're willing to do to reduce emissions, and coming up with a target for the state based on that. And that's what they will be then trying to achieve, which since they're going to set it based on what they're, it doesn't sound like it's going to be very ambitious, I think, is the main problem. And unfortunately, the majority last session did not want to set good science-based targets. And so this is what the DES is left to do. So I encourage people to go to the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan meetings and give input. But we should always be clear when we're speaking that what we really want is science-based emission reduction targets that the state should work hard to achieve rather than doing what's convenient, which doesn't seem to be a responsible way of handling your pollution. Okay, discussion. Does anybody have any comments about the climate action plan stuff before we get into bills?
Yeah, there's like 5 working groups in the climate action plan. And I was wondering if we wanted to try to coordinate to make sure that New Hampshire Network had at least one person in each working group to provide, I don't know, science, whatever, or, we may not have expertise in each area, right? Because one of them is like building stuff and another is construction. But there's a part of me that's like, well, we've got several hundred members in New Hampshire Network. Could we find people to participate in each working group just to have a voice? Or is that not something we think is worth our time? Mark, if you're talking, you're on mute. Mark Longley. Okay.
No, okay. Oh, hello, Representative Germana. You're here also. Great. Okay, so two of the bills that we're just about to start talking about. We have
All
the
right, then let's go talk about the bills and
sponsors of the
we
bills.
can put my other suggestion on the back burner and while we've got our legislators here.
Sounds good. Okay, so um, if somebody will copy and paste the agenda link into the chat for me, in case people who joined after I last pasted it, I'll continue on. Okay, so
I'll
the
do
first,
that.
thank you. So the first one, I just have the LSR number. I don't know if a bill number has been assigned to it yet, but it is relative to proxy carbon pricing and state procurement. This is Representative Germana's bill, and we are just about to meet on Friday with the, it's the administrator of procurement. And he had concerns last year about how he would actually implement this, and was concerned that it would be complicated and slow down the state's purchasing of vehicles and building heating equipment. So hopefully we can allay the concerns. So does everybody know what proxy carbon pricing is? I guess I should start off with that. Does anybody want to hear what it is?
John, is this significantly different, this bill from last year's?
I believe it's the same text.
Uh-huh. Good.
Yes, same text.
Okay.
Yeah.
To hear.
Yeah, and I've been wondering if maybe we should just clarify what we're talking about is the emissions, putting a price on the emissions from the fuel that would be used by the transportation devices and the building heating equipment, so that we're not trying to get him to calculate a proxy carbon price on the purchase of the things. It's the full life cycle cost. It's the using of the things that are burning the fossil fuels that we want to anticipate a carbon price, showing that it will be more and more expensive to use them in the future. Hopefully guiding the decisions to clean energy choices, electrification of heating and transportation. Okay, so does anybody have any questions about this first bill?
Well, if I could just say, first of all, John, thank you for, following up and your persistence with the commissioner. It was, we've been trying to get this meeting with him since, I think just after Thanksgiving, and I didn't hear back from him after a certain point, but John stayed on them and was able to get a meeting set up. I think it's important that when we talk to him on Friday, that we either get him to get on board with the language we have, or if we need to have some type of amendment that would make it work. I think, the committee heard a lot about it last year. I think that was good for educating the committee. But unless we can have some coming together with the commissioner, I don't think that there's going to be a lot of patience with the committee if it's just a rehearing of the bill without any new new steps on it. So I'm really hopeful that on Friday, John's going to do the heavy lifting and explain to the commissioner, how they can put this into practice. And as I said, that can either result in him supporting the bill kind of as it is, or if we have to have an amendment that provides language that makes it more workable for the agency, then we can do that too. So Friday will be an important meeting.
Great. So fingers crossed. And for all of these bills, I should have said this before going into them, but so we don't know what the bills are that are going to be discussed next week until the calendar comes out on Thursday or Friday. So the reason, so we want to get prepared and people up to speed, so that if you can go into Concord and talk for 2 minutes to give, another voice of public opinion about why this is important to you, that would be really good. Also, we can do online testimony. You can go to the website and just oppose or support a bill for the following week, and we count those and use them in op-eds and letters to the editor and mails to legislators. And so even if they don't, I think, use those numbers unless you can get 1,000 people saying that you want something. And we usually only get a couple hundred on a climate bill and energy bill. So also, if you can talk to your friends and give them a heads up, there's, the network will have dozens of bills over the next couple months where we'll be asking for help. But there's just these 4 climate bills. So it would be good to put a really good push on these. And it would be great to, I think our record is about 250 online testimony people weighing in to support a climate bill, which is pretty good. But if you look at something like education, they sometimes do get 1,000 people weighing in on a bill. So we want to kind of raise the level of attention to climate by showing the state legislature that there's people out there that are watching and care. Okay, so great, thank you. The next one, I don't have the bill number yet, but should in the next week or so. Establishing a commission to study the short and long-term impacts of pending national and regional carbon pricing mechanisms on New Hampshire's citizens, businesses, institutions, and environment. Okay, so this one, Representative Thomas graciously co-sponsored for us. I think this may be the 4th or 5th time that this bill has gone through the state legislature. I think Senator Martha Fuller Clark did it, and Representative Marge Shepherdson, and was it Representative Lee Oxenham maybe? And now Representative Thomas. This is the intent of this bill is to help educate the state about the reason for pricing carbon, the increasing likelihood of carbon pricing coming at the federal level because it's spreading around the world, prices are rising, and border carbon adjustments are going to start charging US exporters for carbon pollution when we export goods into other markets, starting with the EU in 2026. But Japan and the UK will follow shortly. Australia and Canada are looking at doing this also. So if the federal government puts a price on carbon, it's going to change the picture in New Hampshire. So it's going to make fossil fuels gradually more expensive if fossil fuel producers have to start paying a steadily rising carbon fee. So we want to encourage everybody, especially the state, but businesses and people, to start thinking buying a new fossil fuel burning machine, whether it's to drive yourself around or heat your house, is a bad financial move because you're buying a big piece of equipment that's going to lock you into using fossil fuels for a long time. And it's highly likely that these fuels are going to start getting more expensive. The reason I say highly likely is I'm very optimistic. Let me share my screen for 1 second. I think that's the good one. Okay, so when I think about climate solutions, this is kind of something that everybody that is worried about climate change should know. We have to price carbon to meet our climate goals. We need a global price, and it's got to be a very high price. And this is according to Secretary of Treasury Janet Yellen,
Okay.
the IPCC, World Bank, and many other leading experts. But economists say if we don't put a price on carbon emissions from fossil fuels, it doesn't really matter what else we do, we're going to fail to meet our goals. And so I look at this as like, we have to price carbon. The only thing missing right now is the political will to do it. And we can change that ourselves by building political will to get Congress to do it. It probably won't happen the next couple of months, but the more people know about a powerful, beneficial, far-reaching policy like carbon fee and dividend and can explain it to people and write Congress, we can make it happen eventually. And so in my mind, that is going to happen. We're going to put a price on carbon in the US, use a border carbon adjustment, harmonize our carbon price with our major trading partners like the EU and Canada, and use a border carbon adjustment to charge free polluting countries in trade, which will motivate them to price carbon. And that's half of solving climate change, is getting a price on pollution, greenhouse gas pollution. Okay, so given that kind of have to, if you want to have hope about climate, once you've learned a lot about it, you have to assume that we are going to be able to price carbon. So then the question is, how do we help state leaders understand this? So this study bill is a way to have a wide variety of stakeholders get together and research what's going on with carbon pricing around the world and the likelihood of it happening in the US, how it would impact New Hampshire if the federal government does price carbon, and things that we could do to prepare for it to make our economy more competitive, to avoid wasting money. And so my hope is that this will generate a report that would be 20 or 30 pages long that would say we see a strong likelihood of federal carbon pricing in the next 6 or 8 years. In order to prepare for this, we recommend investments in energy efficiency, working on electrifying our heating and transportation in the state, not buying any more gas heating equipment, not having the PUC give the go-ahead to more gas pipelines, but expand and accelerate our investments in wind and solar and offshore and nuclear and every other clean energy solutions. So this is kind of a foundational study. And so far the Republicans have had no interest in looking into this. But there's reports, there's a state and trends on carbon price report from the World Bank. There's a lot of information from the IPCC. Anyway, so Representative Thomas, do you have anything more you'd like to say about your bill?
Well, technically it's your bill, right? But I'm very happy to bring it forward. And there's another representative, Pat Long from Manchester, not the Senator Pat Long, but the Representative Pat Long, who has co-sponsored this. One thing to be aware of, it's the same wording, and you're right. This is the same bill that we've brought forward a couple times. And sometimes that's what you have to do. You just have to keep at it, keep the conversation going. But there is no fiscal note attached to this bill, which means that there's a possibility it could be very early in the game, because what they try to do is the non-fiscal notes, push them out, and then they address the fiscal notes. So this could be turned around fairly quickly. I believe it will come to my committee, which is Science, Technology, and Energy. Right now, they've seated 10 Republicans and 8 Democrats because of the numbers. Going to be very honest with you, there's not a snowball's chance in hell that this bill is going to pass. But I know that. And but what we can do is write letters to the editor. We can reach out to the representatives through email. We can reach out to constituents and the communities and get the word out there. And that's the value of this. Somebody in the chat, I think it was Mary Beth, you mentioned House Rule 44, which we're going to be voting on tomorrow. If that rule is amended, I anticipate a vote going forward to try to kill this bill in committee. They don't have the numbers right now, but we could use that. We could, if they try to do that, we could definitely use it. So you know, we're going to have to be strategic with what we can do with this. Again, I mean, I suppose there is a slight chance, maybe, you know, that it could be heard, but I've been sitting on that committee now for 2 years, and I don't anticipate it. But that doesn't mean we can't use it as a vehicle to educate people.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what I hope we can do. I just pasted a web page link into chat. So I documented the history of this study bill, which is actually quite interesting, related to Representative Janine Notter of Merrimack. She was the GOP House Whip. I think she's got a promotion happening now, and she's no longer the whip, but she has been the whip for the last couple sessions, and so she's been instrumental. She's been holding up the red flag on the House floor for the whole House votes on this study bill. Now, the interesting thing is one of our other projects, and I'm sorry, Karishma, as soon as we finish talking about this, now I'll take your question, but this is related to your citizens petition warrant article topic that came up today. We did a citizens petition warrant article that was a resolution to take action on climate pollution. And the body of the text said we want our state and federal legislators to pass carbon fee and dividend legislation to, you know, as recommended by economists, to protect our economy and our future. And in Merrimack, so the process of a citizen petition warrant article is that you collect the signatures, turn it into the town hall, the clerk, and then in an SB2 town, there's a deliberative session for everything, all the warrants articles. The town gets to talk about each one, and people can suggest amendments to the text. Well, in Merrimack, I believe it was Representative Notter that suggested an amendment to their resolution to take action on climate pollution. So instead of asking for legislation of carbon fee and dividend, she changed it to, we want a study of carbon fee and dividend at the federal level and its impacts on New Hampshire. Now, ironically, it was voted 2,000 in favor and 1,000 against. So it was overwhelming town support to do a study on a federal carbon price on New Hampshire. What are the impacts? Which is exactly what this bill is that we're talking about. And she has seen that her town really wants it, 2-1, are in favor of doing a study, and she has told all the Republicans to vote against it multiple times. So this is something that it seems like the media would be interested in covering, but also the public testimony when this bill comes, if we do actually get to a hearing where we can give public testimony on it. I guess we could do public testimony on it before the committee decided not to discuss it, right? There would still be the ability for the public, I would assume, to weigh in, and I don't know. Okay, so if there is, we want to make a really big showing of support, public support for this, to show what a farce it is that they don't want to talk about this when the public does. And this is the kind of thing that we can then talk about on NHPR and in op-eds and other things. It's really, you know, I've been doing this for 8 years now, testifying in the State House and seeing our brave representatives who are trying to do things about climate change being thwarted by a group that is just being misled by propaganda from the fossil fuel industry, wrapped around by the Koch front groups in a thin veneer of conservative values, but it's got a rotten core. It's anti-science, anti-economics, really keeping pollution free from fossil fuels is their goal. And they talk about it as small government, but it's really just irresponsible. No government is what they seem to be shooting towards. So we need to speak up because I'm just frustrated. And I'm not the only one that's frustrated. There's a lot of people that's frustrated. I sent a mail to David Brooks, the Granite Geek guy of Concord Monitor, a couple days ago. And this morning he published a short article about HCR1, which we'll talk about next. And he sent me a mail back and he said, I'm really frustrated. He said, I'm just losing my patience. And he just called the people that are not respecting the science infantile or something in his article. Anyway, it was pretty good. Okay, so
Called them toddlers.
toddlers, thank you. Yeah. Okay, so any more comments on the study bill? But you can see why we want to get a lot of input. If we can testify, it would be great to have a bunch of people and we can have a couple nights before we can get together, email or in a group and pick out specific things that different people want to highlight, because you only get a couple minutes to say something, and you want to be concise and brief and not repeat things that have been said before. So, if we get 5 or 10 people to show up and testify, it's helpful to kind of talk about what points each of us will try to cover. And then, after other people have spoken, you can say, I agree with this and this and this, and here's, what I say. Okay, so, okay, well, I'll just go in order. Sorry, we'll do HCR1 in a minute, but I promised, Karishna, did you have a question?
Thanks, John. So it's pronounced Karishma with an M.
Karishma, thank you.
No worries. So, John, I apologize. I don't know enough to. I know that you have a full agenda, but I just had a question. So you talked about carbon pricing, which sounded like an interesting idea, but how can it possibly happen at the federal level, given that the new administration is going to be absolutely against any sort of science or environmental causes? So are you still expecting that the United States will start carbon pricing at the federal level?
Yeah, I don't know the exact timing of it. The longer we wait, there's a growing carbon price gap between the US price, which is 0 right now, and our trading partners like the EU, Australia, Canada, Japan. There's 75 countries and regions that are pricing carbon, covering about 24% of the world's fossil fuel use, and prices are rising. And starting in 2026 with the EU, our exporters are going to start paying for carbon pollution at the border when their goods enter an economy that has a carbon price. Now, this is going to be a competitive disadvantage because countries with a carbon price are decarbonizing their economies in the most cost-effective way. And if the US is not decarbonizing its economy and others are, our goods are going to start getting less and less competitive because we will keep having to pay their carbon price at the border. So eventually, we're going to be arm twisted into pricing carbon. If it takes arm twisting, that may be 10 years from now. But if you look at Canada, their price is rising $15 Canadian a year. It's about $70 per ton today. The EU is about $70 per ton of CO2 now. Their price is almost tripled in the last 5 years or so. So as the rest of our trading partners' carbon prices rise and they start charging us at the border, businesses are going to start pushing stronger and stronger for carbon pricing. There's really only one industry that doesn't want a carbon price, and that's the fossil fuel industry. It's holding back innovation and investment and transition to clean energy solutions in the whole US economy. Many of the businesses that it's holding back aren't there yet. They haven't developed. But if we want the US to be a leader this century in the global economy, this is the next change, the change away from a fossil fuel-based economy to clean energy economy. And it's developing all of the clean energy solutions that make that possible that's going to be what sells in the next, several decades. There's going to be a huge market for this stuff to decarbonize an economy. And if we have a carbon price, that will motivate private investment and US business. We'll get an efficient market doing all the right things to reduce carbon emissions. And this is what some other countries are doing that we compete against. So we have to price carbon. The group that I'm the state coordinator for New Hampshire, Citizens Climate Lobby, used to be laser focused on getting carbon fee and dividend legislation passed at the federal level. There's a bill in Congress now called the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act to do this. It's been in for 4 sessions. It was a bipartisan bicameral bill introduced 4 sessions ago. The only thing lacking is political will. And the reason that I volunteer all my time on climate, what I do pretty much all the time that I'm volunteering is I'm trying to figure out ways to help people understand this policy and get them to do things to help Congress pass this legislation. Because I really believe we're going to fail to address climate change without carbon pricing, and we can charge a steadily rising carbon fee at the source by charging the fossil fuel producers and rebating the money back to households in equal shares each month. Economists say this is, it's a highly progressive impact. If you rebate all the money, most families come out ahead financially of where they are now. There's not a problem for anybody with carbon fee and dividend except for the fossil fuel industry. But people don't realize this. They're misinformed by the fossil fuel industry's marketing about carbon taxes. It's going to make energy more expensive and it's going to hurt the US economy. These are all lies. It's disinformation because they really don't want a carbon price in the economy. So yes, I think it's going to happen. And if you read the IPCC reports, you have to think it's going to happen if you want to have hope that we're going to address climate change and hold warming to a relatively safe level. It's really the only way we're going to do it. So anyway, that's my opinion, but there's no other policy that we can do that will have reach beyond the US borders. We could ban coal today in the US. That would send energy prices skyrocketing. But we couldn't get other countries to ban coal. It would make us less competitive in the global market, and voters would really not like paying the higher prices that would result. But we can put a steadily rising carbon fee on the production and import of fossil fuels, rebate the money back to households so people come out ahead. This is a popular way to price carbon. And then we can use a border carbon adjustment to push that price around the world with the other partners that are pricing carbon. Okay. So that's probably enough on that. We can talk about it in another meeting. The carboncashback.org website has a way that you can do a citizens petition warrant article to inform your town about this policy and let your town vote on it. We've done this in about 44 towns so far, and 75% of them voted yes, we want to ask our state and federal legislators to do a carbon fee and dividend. So when people read about it and think about it a little bit, they're generally in favor of it. Okay, so let's talk about HB 106, establishing a commission to determine the monetary costs of climate damage to the state of New Hampshire and the best means of recouping such costs. Representative Germana, this is your bill. Would you like to introduce it?
I don't think that's mine.
Oh,
I think
Tony Kaplan's.
I think it's Tony Kaplan.
oh, you're right. I'm sorry.
You got me panicked for a second there.
I'm sorry. We've got a lot of climate heroes in the state legislature. We just need to get you in the majority. Right. Okay. He's not here. Well, the reason that I like this one is the reason that economists say we need a carbon price is because right now, when pollution's free, we have a producer and a consumer relationship with fossil fuels. The producer likes that their pollution is free because that lets them sell their product at a low price. The consumer the short-sighted consumer likes to buy fossil fuels that don't have a pollution price internalized in the cost of the products, because then they get cheap energy. But there's a third party that's being hurt, and that's all of us, from the damages of the pollution of fossil fuels, causing climate change and extreme weather events and all the expensive problems. The Fifth National Climate Assessment said it's about $150 billion a year for the US for extreme weather events that we're paying right now. So this is an external cost of using fossil fuels. When you have external costs that are not seen by the producer or consumer, but some third party is paying them, this is an inefficient market. It's a failure of the market to operate efficiently. And so economists say, well, we want an efficient market so that we're getting the biggest benefit from our capitalist system. So this study will estimate the damages to New Hampshire, but then instead of pricing carbon, it's saying, look, the fossil fuel industry knew that its greenhouse gas pollution would result in these costs to us. So we should recoup the losses. We're having to pay higher costs in the state, and other states are now doing this. New York and Vermont have passed legislation to recoup money from the fossil fuel industry to help pay for damages. So this is Representative Kaplan's to do this. Really like this bill. Talking about the damages that we know are happening and the costs to New Hampshire, I think is a good way to bring everybody on board about the problem, because nobody really likes the fossil fuel industry so much that we're just going to keep paying for the damages out of our own, good nature. Okay, so that's a good one. HCR1, a resolution for calling for policymakers locally and nationally to fully consider all relevant information and factors pertaining to climate change before pursuing courses of action that could adversely affect any economy or environment. Now, when you read this, it sounds pretty good, like what we've been talking about, right? We should be assessing the science-based damages that are being caused by our choices, and that would help us make better ones. But Representative Nodder is a co-sponsor on this. If you remember that name, she's the one that is against doing a study on the impacts and how New Hampshire can prepare for a carbon price. This is the whereas clauses are just it's almost a caricature of a science denier statement. It's embarrassing to me that somebody would have submitted this bill. Representative Thomas, would you like to talk about your ChatGPT experiment on this one?
I'm sorry, who's the prime sponsor?
The chairman of that committee, is it Moffett?
I think it's Moffett. Yeah.
Yeah, then nothing good can come from that.
Yeah. So, and I've taught college classes, and I would never suggest that anyone, use Chat GPT as a reference or anything. But I took this bill and I put it into Chat, and I said, why is this a bad bill? And basically it came back, and I can put the results in the chat for this meeting. Every single line is problematic. And there's the focus on historical predictions, which is misleading. There's a false equivalence between science and skepticism. There's suppression and fraud claims. There's alarmism and intimidation, of course. The economic impact focus is it says, while considering economic impacts is important, the resolution's emphasis on avoiding policies that, quote, adversely affect any economy could be used to justify inaction. There's ambiguous goals, and an appeal to balance without addressing any urgency. So I spoke a little, or I emailed with John earlier, and he wanted to submit an amendment to sort of rework this bill, but really there's not one line in it that should be kept. So I'm not sure that it's worth, because any complete rewrite, it's going to be thrown out. And so I think that the strategy for this one is to just go and take this information and just blast out into the general public how ridiculous this is. And then if we want to, next year, the second year of this term, we could introduce another House resolution that has wording that we agree with. But that's just my opinion. You don't have to, you can do whatever you want. But,
No, well,
but not one sentence was considered credible by chat.
Yeah, I agree with Wendy. I just read through it in the link, and it's all classic climate denial stuff. I mean, there's nothing worth even trying to salvage on that. I mean, the only good news is it's a House resolution, so that means nothing. But there's nothing worth trying to salvage.
Yeah. And they wouldn't accept any salvaging anyway.
Right.
Well, isn't this where it's important to still have hearings so that well-educated, articulate people such as ourselves can come and say that?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Well, provided there's no change. Well, no, this is a Republican bill. So even if there is a change to that House rule, it will still have a hearing.
Mhm.
And yes, that's where we need to get tons of people saying this is ridiculous. This is an insult to our state. This is not going to do anything. This is a disgrace. Yeah, absolutely.
this is a disgrace. And I think I've just seen this stuff going on year after year, and the media doesn't cover it because there's not enough interest in it. And this is a good example. So Representative Nodder is on this one, so we can tie in, other bills in media and the history in that notnodder.org website with a case study that talks about this. So I think so I completely agree. I didn't know if it would be possible to try to substitute all of the content so that we could have a side-by-side comparison of each whereas clause. What I tried to do in my amendment version of it was take the anti-position of each fatally flawed clause and put something legitimate there so that we could say, well, this is why we want this change. And so we could also do that just picking them apart one at a time with multiple papers. Yes, Wharton.
Yeah, I mean, another way to look at this would be as an opportunity to get it to fail by portraying it successfully to some moderate Republicans as too extreme. So if we could, I think it would be a very, maybe is that a reasonable goal? I mean, what do people think? Because if we could get it to fail, it would backfire. Essentially, the point of this is Republican cohesion around an extreme position on climate, but not all Republicans probably agree with that, but they will be pressured to vote in favor of this unless, I mean, the amendment route is a different approach, but you catch my drift. Is if we can actually get some people on the Republican side to stand up and say, wait a minute, let's just not do this. Climate change is important, and this is BS, and let's tank it.
Yeah, I think maybe this is a good time. So we've got a lot of people here, and there's more in the network. There's probably some people that are citizens, residents of the town of some of these state representatives that are on the committee that's going to hear it. So this might be a case where it would be great if somebody from one of those towns could ask one of their representatives to go meet them for coffee and talk about their concerns about this thing kind of, offline. I'll paste the link to the committee membership. Have the committee seats all been assigned yet, or is it they have? Okay, so the website's up to date. Great, thanks. All right, so yeah, I think that's exactly what I want to just discuss. What's the best strategy? Like complete public shaming, or maybe a more like nuanced approach where we say, look, I can see you need to, you're on this committee, the chairman is on this bill. It's going to be a little difficult for you to oppose it, but I think, this is just kind of too extreme. And, you can just tell them that you're not comfortable because some of the text seems to be criticizing members of the public that are concerned about this scientifically identified problem, and you're calling them extreme alarmists. And so,
Yeah,
or
it
maybe,
reminds me a lot of the anti-carbon pricing resolution, which was also Notter, and this was probably 2022. And that was a very close vote, but it succeeded.
Mhm.
And I felt like at that time, if we pushed a little bit harder, or peeled off some moderate Republicans, we could have tanked that. I remember I spoke with Rodney Deshays, who's no longer in the House, and I was very pleased. He was a Republican, and I was very pleased he did not show up for the vote on that resolution. And he was pushing back on me and saying, "Look, this is BS. Don't even worry about it." But I said, "Look, don't vote yes on this." And I felt like maybe he heard me. So if we as a group could work on building those bridges, and that could be, at least the beginning of some kind of more broad political acceptance of climate change as a serious problem that we all need to do something about. And we can't have this nonsense antic, just crazy counter truth approach to a serious problem. Anyway, I don't want to take up a lot of time with this. We probably have more things on the
I
agenda.
strongly encourage people to ask to have a coffee with their representatives, especially if they're Republicans, to try to make a connection and get them to vote against, the party line on this stuff. However, I've done that myself in Windham for 7 years, and I have a good relationship with most of them still. I just had breakfast a couple of weeks ago with one of them, but they never vote how I want them to. And so I think, the pressures on them to follow what their party wants on these things is sometimes just overwhelming. So that's why I've kind of reached my limit of, but I think we should try both. I think people should meet with their local representatives and see if they can, because I think that's a much better way of going about change. But on the other hand, it seems like public shaming might be the only thing that is going to get our state to change its direction. Oh, go ahead, Representative Thomas.
And I'm amongst friends. You can call me Wendy here. You don't have to call me representative. Shaming is effective to a degree. However, shaming is not effective unless you come up with a solution that's better. So if you're going to meet with these people, you can say that this resolution, doesn't make sense or something. Don't necessarily shame them, but say, instead of wording it this way, perhaps we could, it'd be more effective, and make them look like a champion or something. There's a little bit of psychology to all of this. That's what I'm saying.
Thank you. Yeah, no, my whole career, I chose to be an individual contributor working in a cube on software because I don't understand people. So I'm out of my league here. So definitely want your input and discussion. Thank you. Does anybody else have any ideas about how to how to go about this one. All right. I think numbers are our biggest asset. Like we just need more people showing up at hearings and more people doing online testimony and writing op-eds and letters to the editor. Representative Vose wrote a ridiculous op-ed in the Union Leader a couple of weeks ago. Just, unacceptable. And I don't subscribe to the Union Leader, so I don't know if there was much pushback on it. I wrote a brief thing, but it would be good to have them, if we can get into the media in New Hampshire, NPR, NHPR, Union Leader, Concord Monitor, In-Depth New Hampshire, New Hampshire Bulletin, to get the visibility that we need science-based policies, and waiting for other people to solve this pollution problem and then just doing it after it's cheap to switch is completely irresponsible, for our kids, for ourselves, for the future. Okay, so I guess we can go to the next one. Does anybody have anything else on HCR1? Okay. So Representative Germana, I think this last one was what I was thinking of when I said you were the third one we did. I don't know the what is it, LSR or the bill number of this or resolution. House resolution proclaiming the rights to clean air, water, and a healthy environment. This just came up in our thread today. Would you like to talk about this?
Yeah, it's a very simple, very simple resolution. Last year, Representative Tim Horrigan, he put forward a constitutional amendment that was really just taken from the Montana Constitution, and it clearly wasn't going to pass. We had a number of Democrats who didn't vote for it. I made the case for it on the floor. And afterwards, there were a number of Republicans who said to me, I agree with the fundamental idea, but they were concerned about having it be a constitutional amendment because what would that mean in terms of litigation and whatever. My argument was, of course, it'll lead to litigation. I mean, how much litigation do we have over the First Amendment or the Second Amendment, right? I mean, that's actually kind of the purpose of those things. But this is my attempt just to kind of bring it back, but in the form of a House resolution. It's very simple. The gist of it is that actually the right to a healthy and clean environment is the most fundamental of rights. It is the basis of our enjoyment of other rights. And being a House resolution, frankly, it has no weight, right? I mean, it doesn't affect anything, but it's number one intended to try to put Republicans in a position, hopefully, where they'll support the principle, the fundamental principle. And given the makeup of the legislature, it is the only thing we can do, really, is to hope that we can get enough to come on board that it becomes a position of the New Hampshire House. And if not, then shame, which I agree with Wendy, has very limited usefulness, but trying to shame them if they refuse to even acknowledge in a non-binding resolution that it's a fundamental right. So it's very simple. The language of it, there are like 3 simple whereases, and it is, you'll see it when it finally does get published. It is incredibly straightforward. It just says it's a fundamental right, and it is the basis of all of our other rights.
Terrific. Thank you. All right, we'll support it.
Yeah, and to Patricia Martin's question, can you roll call the vote? We can. Let me just give you a real quick, very quickly. Sometimes we don't do roll calls because Republicans actually, sometimes we can get Republicans if we don't roll call a vote. There's a lot more pressure on Republicans to toe the party line if they are on the record. So that's something we'll have to talk about when the time comes. We can roll call it, but the people, I would say on this bill, the people you would call out on a roll call, it's really not really very worthwhile. I think probably you have a better chance of getting some Republicans if it's on what we call a division vote, which is where the names are not attached to the vote.
Oh, good. I like this strategy talk. It's very helpful. Thank you. Karishma, do you have a question? You're on mute.
Sorry. I have a question. So first of all, thank you very much, Nick, for introducing this resolution. But if it is a resolution now, that means it's no longer a constitutional amendment. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. And you know, a constitutional amendment, of course, requires a supermajority. You know, and then it's got to go through the whole, you know, it'd have to go through the Senate as well. This is just the House. I forget, I should know this now as the deputy floor leader. I forget, Wendy, do you know if resolutions, is that a bare majority or is, I don't remember. If a resolution, it's just specific to the House. Yeah, that's right. It's not a constitutional amendment. My best case scenario here is that it puts the New Hampshire House on record as stating that this is a fundamental right, which is, I think, is the very best we could hope for under the circumstances.
And I think there's a certain number that it's not just the majority for a House resolution, but I'm not 100% sure. I have to look that up.
Yeah, so even as a non-binding, you know, resolution, it's a real uphill battle. But as I said, the hope was very best. The House goes on record being officially stating that this is a right, and then we can use it politically, strategically, if the Republicans vote against it.
So if it is no longer a constitutional amendment, what, okay, let me back up a little bit. When you tried to pass it as a constitutional amendment following the Montana language, was it because that would allow you to proceed with a lawsuit similar to Held v. Montana? Is that what you were thinking?
Yes.
Yeah,
And
I'm
now
sorry.
that it's, sorry.
Oh,
Go
good. I have a hard stop at 8, Karishma. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe
you
I'll
just
reach
ask
out
one more quickly.
to Nick later.
Yeah. Shoot me an email.
Terrific. And so I just pasted a link. So I was very nonpartisan in part to this meeting, which is uncharacteristic of a CCL person. So in order to try to make up some of that, I pasted a link that you can use to write Congress and ask them to work together in a bipartisan way over the next session, which I'm sure our Democrats will certainly be trying to do that because you know they're in the minority in the first place, but also they're pretty good about working across the aisle. But these actions are good exercise to see how easy it is to send Congress a quick email, and also even when somebody's doing the right thing, when somebody else tells them that they appreciate that, that really helps. It makes people feel like what they're doing isn't just yelling into the wind. They need support. So with that in mind, I want to thank our representatives who came here tonight for all your efforts. It's a big job you have, and not an easy year ahead, but we'll be helping you as much as we can. And then for the rest of you, I think just please email me or join the New Hampshire Network's Climate Action Team, Climate Working Group, and we can use that Google group to communicate back and forth about these bills. That's newhampshirenetwork.org, and you can join and then just shoot me an email and we'll add it to the working group. So thank you so much for your time, everybody. I look forward to working with you on these bills and hopefully see you in Concord soon.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.